Well, officially welcome everyone to our Paying for Inclusive Higher Education webinar. This is a webinar we frequently do because this is one of the biggest questions we get asked from the families that we work with. We get to share about the power of inclusive higher education and the value that it adds to our students' lives. But at the base level, the question is, so how do I make that feasible for my family? And we know that this is a big question. There's lots of components to it, and it can be very nuanced. But we hope that this hour really addresses basic questions about general cost, what you should be expecting, and what are some resources that can help chip away at that big number that we tend to see when it comes to inclusive higher education or higher education in general. So I'm gonna have some time throughout where we're gonna pause and allow you to ask questions if I didn't address something that you were hoping to hear about during our time. I will point out that I am only doing one half of our presentation. So the first 20 to 30 minutes is really for me to do an overview of inclusive higher education, an overview of the types of financial resources you can access. And then I get to kick it over to Mike Keglowitz from Able Accounts to talk about the specific Able savings accounts and how that can benefit students pursuing inclusive higher education or students that don't pursue inclusive higher education and the benefit of that anyways. So we have a lot to get through in a little bit of time, but I do want to make sure that you guys get your questions answered. So feel free as we're going, if a question pops up, you can either raise your hand or you can drop that in the chat box for us to review as we keep going. And then we'll have a feedback survey for you to fill out afterwards. That's another avenue to ask more specific questions and see if we need to follow up with you directly. And then we'll send you this recording along with the resources that we talk about in a follow-up email tomorrow. So hopefully that gives you the resources that you need as you dig into this. I am Shayna Lang. I have the honor of being IN's program manager, so I get to work with our programs across the state of Colorado that serve students with intellectual disabilities. And Mike, I'll have you just unmute and introduce yourself real quick.
My name is Mike Keglowitz, and I run Colorado Able for the state of Colorado. So I'll be talking more about Able accounts and how they may be able to benefit you or your child.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Mike. Okay, so quick to start. Hopefully, you guys have heard these things before or have been at another presentation that we've done, but I'm just going to give a quick glance just in case you haven't been. Who is IN? So, IN is a nonprofit in the state of Colorado dedicated to creating pathways to higher education for students with intellectual disabilities. And within those programs, inclusive higher education programs, we want students to be pursuing goals in four areas: academic growth, social development, career advancement, and greater independence. So that's just what we want to see. We want our students with intellectual disabilities to have access to growth in those areas statewide. And some of the things that we do as an organization, because we do not provide the direct services on these college campuses, we do education and outreach, things like this. We help work on access and looking at how can we get more scholarship funding for students. And we also do evaluation of those programs to make sure that they're serving our students to the best of their ability. So in our short time, just 1 hour, we're going to cover what are the college options in Colorado for students with intellectual disabilities? What does it look like to pay for those programs? And what are some of those components of the cost, the overall cost? Big piece where I want to live is the resources to help cover those costs. And then, as I mentioned, Mike gets to speak to Colorado Able accounts. So we're going to jump into what is inclusive higher education. So, inclusive higher ed is an alternative admission, so another pathway or another way for students with intellectual disabilities to be enrolled in a college campus. What we want people to know is that this is not a special education classroom on college campuses. These are inclusive programs. Our students are included in the campus. They attend classes alongside neurotypical college peers. They go to frat parties if they so desire. They have the typical college experience because we believe that that's where true growth happens. They take courses in their career goal. The big difference within these programs is that they have access to accommodations and modifications to meet their level. Because of those modifications, they're earning a certificate credential traditionally instead of your typical degree. Some of our students are able to pursue an associate's degree, but most of our students, if they require modifications, they're going to pursue a credential or a certificate credential. With an area of study and a focus, all for credit and rigorous in so many ways. And so that is a unique outcome that they get, but it is really focused on their career goal. And then they get to, during their time, participate in career readiness, independent living experiences, and just general campus community and social engagement. All of that takes a lot of support for our students. And so there's a lot more peer mentor support and staff support in the four domains that I mentioned: academics, social, career, and independence. So we've got peer mentors in these programs that kind of organically and normatively support our students across campus and in their career experiences. We also have staff members that are working with them on their academics and those modifications and placement in meaningful internships and job experiences. So they have lots of support involved in these inclusive higher education programs because we want to see our students succeed and thrive and reach their goals in all of these areas. We have some other webinars that really go into depth of what that looks like. What do those supports look like? That's not our focus for today, but it is a reminder, I think, as we're looking at the finances of inclusive higher education, it's important to be reminded that the students in these programs are receiving additional services and supports than other college students. And that's where some of that added charge comes in. So, what are the programs that exist in Colorado? I'm just going to go down the line. We have 8 total. UCCS in Colorado Springs. They were one of our first. They have a residential options for students, and they are also our only one that's actually accredited as an inclusive higher education program. All of the institutions are accredited institutions in the state of Colorado, but this is an accredited inclusive higher education program, which is more of a national push, which is really exciting and just shows that they did a lot of hard work and leading the charge in that way. We have Elevate at Arapahoe Community College, which is a community college, which means that there's no online or on-campus living. So that's one of our commuter campuses that's in Littleton, Colorado. We've got the Global Program in Regis University, which has on-campus living and has kind of a variety of options from 1 year to 4 years. Students can take a 1-year path, 2-year path, 3-year path, or 4-year path, and that's pretty unique to them. UNC in Greeley, Colorado. That's a traditional 4-year program with on-campus living options. In all of these, you guys will see that CTP designation down at the bottom, which is a term that really just means for us that students who are enrolled in those programs have access to financial aid. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. These are some of our newer ones. So RAM Scholars at CSU in Fort Collins. They have a 3-year program. They don't yet have residential and they don't yet have that CTP designation. It is hopefully going to be approved at the federal level here shortly. So right now, students enrolled in that program are not completing the FAFSA and don't have any of that federal financial aid supporting the cost of the program. And I can speak more to that in a little bit. MSU Denver in Denver, Colorado. They're another commuter campus with a traditional 4-year program. They're also waiting on their CTP, so that has not come through yet. And Cultivate at Lamar Community College for our Southern Colorado friends. They plan to have residential living, but not quite yet. And they are also waiting on their CTP. And then the Aspire Scholars Program is at Pikes Peak State College, a 3-year program, commuter campus, and they do have their CTP. So as I mentioned, that designation, CTP, is going to be important as we talk about financial aid in just a minute. So before I get into the finances, I just want to hear if anybody has questions about those 8 schools, just the generals of inclusive higher education before I dive into the nitty-gritty. Awesome. Okay, let's get into the real stuff. What is the financial reality of inclusive higher education programs? We want to present this in tandem with what is the value add of these inclusive higher education programs for the students that we serve. So, and when we send these slides to you, this is a clickable link where you can go to this study where we're seeing students with intellectual disabilities can be up to 4 times more likely employed after completing their inclusive higher education programs because, for lots of reasons, but a big one is that they have access to content, inclusive content, real world experiences that they haven't previously had access to. And so they're learning hard skills and they're implementing them within career experiences and internships and are becoming more ready for long-term employment that has a lot of meaning to them, but also sets them up for success in their future. So there's so many skills that they develop within their inclusive higher education programs that set them up for that future success. And that's important to have at our foundation when we're talking about it. So what will this cost? What is that looking like? The truth is that higher education, further education costs money for all individuals. So we do know that that is just a normative component. A lot of our individuals coming from special education have been receiving services without having any cost, rightfully so, within their K-12 experience. And so going into post-secondary, it's a normative component to now have cost to the family or to the student. And that could be a shock and a transition, but that is something that is very typical. We do want to remind you that it has been worthwhile for the folks that we've seen gone through these programs. On all of those four pillars, we've seen them grow in so many ways. And so it is worthwhile as they learn those things. We've also learned that it's important for families to be preparing financially over time. It is not feasible for families to learn about this and never have considered inclusive higher education before, never had saved for it, and then be able to pay a large sum in the next semester. And so we really want to be sharing this information with you, hopefully early, encourage you to share this with families early so that there's saving happening, just like we would hope for any typical student and their families. And all of the resources that I'm going to chat about, I just have to make the caveat that they're not guaranteed. What we want to encourage you in are some of the pathways you can pursue to help with the financial component of inclusive higher ed, but all of it is so unique to each individual, each institution. And so hopefully this gives you resources to dig into, knowing that none of it is guaranteed, but hopefully you can access all of it is the dream. So to break it down for tuition and fees for students in these programs. So students enrolled in inclusive higher education programs are going to have the same cost per credit hour as any other student, but they are often taking far fewer credits. So most of the time, students are taking, traditional students for a full course load would be 15 to 18 credits per semester. Our students tend to take 6 to 9 per semester. And so they're paying the same cost per credit hour, but have a lower cost in that realm because it's not as many courses that they're taking. What other students do not encounter, but our students with inclusive higher education do encounter, is the program fee for all of those additional services and all of those four pillars, the peer mentors, the staff support, the placements, etc. So there's a programmatic fee that's on top of that tuition cost, and that is going to vary greatly by school. With all of those 8 programs in our state, there's quite a range of that program. That ranges from either $3,000 annually to upwards of, for our private institution, $20,000 annually. That's a big spectrum. I will say that all of our community colleges are on that $3,000 end. They really value that financial accessibility. And so our community college programs have that all pretty standardized as $3,000. Our universities vary a lot in the realm of $7,000 annually, with that outlier being that $20,000 per school year. And then there's room and board, which is what so many of our students that are living in residential programs attribute to their ability to be independent. And a lot of our graduates that are living on their own, they attribute their ability to be living independently to their experience on a college campus. And so room and board unfortunately has this additional cost, but has also added a lot of value. It varies greatly by school and is really going to be institutional. So it's not necessarily that the program determines the cost of living, it's the institution, it's that university that determines that. And that ranges from $10,000 to $25,000 per school year, depending on what you select, what kind of housing you have, all of those pieces. So I recognize that this can be really overwhelming to look at these numbers and can feel incredibly daunting. There is a sticker shock in a lot of ways for the families that we work with. And ideally, we work with systems in Colorado that can help eliminate the cost of these things and make them more financially feasible for our families. But we do just want you guys to be aware so that it is not as overwhelming as you get closer and closer to your student pursuing inclusive higher education. We encourage you to look at the school websites specifically to see their costs and their charges. At the end of these slides, you'll see a link to all of them, just so you can dig through that. Several of them have a specific tab on their website for costs, just so you can see they want to be transparent about that and what it goes to and how it serves your student. I will note, as I mentioned earlier, IN does not provide these services to students on campus, and so we receive none of those funds. That goes to the institution. It is purely for those inclusive programs on the campus. So, what can make that more palatable? Federal financial aid is a really big one. And there are some caveats to the access that our students have because students are pursuing a modified certificate when they're enrolled in these courses. There is some nuance to the type of financial aid that they can receive at the federal level. So there are three kinds that they can receive when families complete the FAFSA. The first is federal Pell Grants, which are wonderful. The second is federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. And then the third is federal work study programs. So you'll notice that on there are no loans. So they are not any student, whether it's inclusive higher education or not, if they are not pursuing a traditional degree, don't have access to those federal loans. And so our students will have access to these types of grants that they don't have to pay back, which is wonderful. Um, but we do know that that is something typically when people think of FAFSA, they think of federal loans. And so for our students in inclusive higher education programs, we kind of have to separate that out. We still want you to pursue or complete your FAFSA application because there is, even though it's another step, another thing in the process, and it can feel overwhelming, we've had several families be surprised by the amount that they've received in Pell Grants, in scholarship funding, even for that work study. That is an approval for your student to work on campus. And that work, when they get paid on campus via work study funds, that can go back to your tuition. And so every little bit helps. And so we really encourage students and families to complete this FAFSA like right at the beginning if they know they want to pursue inclusive higher education, if they know what institution they're going to jump on this. A lot of institutions will offer like a FAFSA lab or sessions where you can go in and ask questions from their financial aid office. It's a lot of questions, but it really is straightforward to the family about your financial need. And so I'm going to jump down here really quick. What we have seen is families saying, well, I don't have needs, so I'm just not going to do it, or it's not going to be worth the effort. But we really encourage you to do that for a few other reasons. FAFSA, like I said, can give you these grants that you don't have to pay back, but also are required for some of the other resources that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So some other agencies might say, we need you to have FAFSA first, apply for FAFSA first and see what you can get from the federal support, and then we can provide support beyond that if it's appropriate. So it's really a good starting point when it comes to that financial aid and chipping away at that cost. And amounts can change. So what I would say is if you receive FAFSA one year and this is the amount you get, we still want you to continue applying for that because it might increase in one year, it might decrease in another year. And so it is variable in each year. But we really encourage families to jump on that and to ask questions of the institution on how to complete those things to make it more feasible for you. There is a link to Think College is this national organization that supports inclusive higher education across all of our states. They have wonderful resources. And so this little PDF here gives some great insight on the value of federal financial aid for students in inclusive higher education programs. So beyond kind of your traditional FAFSA financial aid, there are some unique components to students with intellectual disabilities or students with disabilities pursuing higher education. And we want to point you to your case management agencies. And I say this with a pretty strong caveat. Not every case management agency operates the same, as you probably know. There are lots of different counties that operate with different pockets of funding, but we want to encourage you to ask questions no matter who your case management agency is. One of the things that we have learned with working with families is that there's some like code words that are really helpful. Some code words might be, do you have any self-determination funds, unmet need funds, or a scholarship application or grant application? There are some case management agencies that have a really small pocket of funding that they only provide to families that communicate need, and they might justify that for a student pursuing inclusive higher education that have a particular career goal that really needs this support. Self-determination funds has kind of like a broader intent, and really any student that says, I want to do this thing with my life can pursue self-determination funds, and a case management agency might be able to provide some of that towards higher education. So those are some of like the code words that we have heard. And there are specific CMAs that we know of that utilize mill levy funding, and those have been the most responsive case management agencies to inclusive higher education requests. And so those are Rocky Mountain Human Services, which is in Denver, and then Developmental Pathways, which serves Arapahoe and Douglas counties. But again, we want to encourage you, even if you're not within those counties, if that's not your case management agency, we encourage you to just ask your counselor, your case management coordinator, to say, hey, do you know of any pockets of funding that are for self-determination or unmet needs? Because we've really seen that benefit lots of students that pursue it. So there's a link here for you to find your case management agency. Hopefully you guys are already connected to those. I know that's like another step in the process of transitions, but we really want students to be communicating with their case management agency that they want to pursue inclusive higher education and see if they have some ideas on how they can help or provide a direct scholarship. In addition to those, there are some specific scholarships and grants. So each inclusive higher education program has at their institution has their own foundation. And foundations are typically known at institutions for providing school scholarships to students. They might have specific categories to look into, but that is one big question to ask of your inclusive higher education staff to see what is the foundation on this institution and do they have scholarships for students? Because the students in our programs are traditional students at the institution and they should be qualified for those scholarships as well. Some schools are going to have specific scholarships that families have set up. So this is an example. UCCS has the Nick Harmon Inclusive Scholarship Fund. So that's something where a family set that up after they graduated and they provide small grants or scholarships to students that fill out a form as they're connected with the director. So you can ask the directors of these programs, do you know of any specific scholarships for students in your program? Or is there anything through the school's foundation that can help with scholarships or chipping away at that cost? There are also a wide range of specific disability-based scholarships that are more national. I haven't really run into Colorado-specific scholarships that are disability-based. A lot of these we are finding from our Think College partners. One of the most common ones is Ruby's Rainbows, and that is one for people with Down syndrome to apply to. They provide scholarships nationwide. The link to this Think College website is updated every year with more and more specific scholarship opportunities. There are things for autism, lots of different categories that is worth looking into. And I know that this can be overwhelming, I think, for any future college student to have to like wade through the scholarship opportunities, but this resource tends to be really, really helpful and gets you in the right direction. So I'd encourage you to save this one and come back to it frequently. And then there's some local organizations that may not be a case management agency, but again, have pockets of funding that want to support students with disabilities in their pursuit of their future goals. So we know that the Colorado Springs Down Syndrome Association has provided some scholarship funding in the past. Developmental Disability Resource Center has done that. North Metro Community Services, they have a grant application for community members. And so it's always worthwhile to toss it out there and see. I would also say there's two links down here at the bottom that help students and families just find general scholarships for any higher education student. A lot of times what we encourage students to do is double check the qualifications. Some scholarships require that you be a degree seeking student. If that is not explicitly stated, then our students certificate seeking should be able to apply and qualify. So just take a close look at that. I am always happy to hop on a call with you if you're looking at specific scholarships to see like, do we think we would actually meet this qualification? Or one of the things that we love to do as an advocacy agency is to connect with scholarshiping organizations if our inclusive higher education students don't meet the qualifications to help inform them about what the breadth of inclusive higher education looks like, and that even if it's not a traditional degree seeking student, look at all of the things that they're doing on this campus and would they be willing to incorporate a certificate pathway into their scholarship. So I would love to be an advocate for that if you guys find something that's of interest to you or your students. And these two resources down at the bottom are a great starting point to find some of those potential scholarships. And then we also want to bring up Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, not because they're a specific financial partner or like a guaranteed financial partner, but because they've been such a wonderful partner for several students that are pursuing a career goal that that was determined necessary for them to pursue inclusive higher education. And when they are connected with DVR and their goals are aligned for inclusive higher education, if there is need and there are other resources that have already been applied and there's still financial need, DVR may find it appropriate to support some of the costs of inclusive higher education. There are some caveats to that that I wanted to just bring up to you all. First, a reminder that they are first a partner for the employment goal attainment. They are not a funder. They're a partner for goal attainment for that employment goal. As appropriate, they may be able to provide financial support for students that are in CTPs. So that designation that allows for federal financial aid is required for any students that are accessing support from DVR in inclusive higher education as well. And that's for a few reasons, and I'll kind of hash this out really quick. Um, they're only able to do that and provide that support financially if IHE or inclusive higher education is determined necessary for their career goals. It's going to be individually based on family need and a financial analysis that's completed. And FAFSA has to be applied first. So that's why that CTP matters. So that families complete that FAFSA, make sure that that's applied first to their bill, and then we look at what's remaining. Their funding support will not cover that program fee. It's really dedicated to the tuition costs and other associated costs with higher education in general. And then they also might be able to, even if they're not able to connect you with funding for inclusive higher education, they can provide you with benefits counseling, somebody else that can help you think through how you're strategically planning all the resources that you have to make these things feel more feasible. And so there's some links here to connect with DVR if you haven't already. We really encourage that specifically because if you've heard, they are on an active wait list, which means that we want you to get applied to them as soon as possible. I have our partner, Rachel Horde from DVR on here. If you just want to pop on and say hello and maybe give like a 2 minute like overview of DVR's support.
Hi, everyone. I mean, Shayna, it seems as though we've talked a bunch in the past because you really did a great job. So I will give you kudos on that. Yeah. So, like Shayna said, we are a division that is solely focused on helping people with disabilities get and keep employment. Sometimes school might be part of that. So we definitely, if you are someone with a disability or you have a child with a disability that you want to help assist in getting a job, definitely send them our way. And then if IHE is part of that puzzle that fits, then that's something we can look at. I think the biggest thing right now and the most important thing, well, not the most important thing, but we are on an active wait list that went into effect last Wednesday, so a week ago today. Vocational rehabilitations across the country might need to go into an order of selection based on budget or people resources like staff resources or both. Over the last 3 years, we've seen an exponential rise in the amount of people coming through our doors, which shows that people need jobs. And unfortunately, we need to sometimes close our plan writing, which is kind of the next step after you apply, until we can get more money to be able to do that and figure that out. But the thing about the wait list that might be confusing, I don't want to confuse anybody, is that once we open categories, we have 3 categories of disability. So most significant disability, and all others. Once we start opening those, people come off based on their application date as well as their disability priority. So you don't want to wait to apply till we're like off a wait list. Because if you apply sooner, then the sooner you're going to get access to services. Not to categorize, but most individuals that are seeking inclusive higher education, that are connected with the CMA, and all of these things are likely going to fall in our most significant disability priority category. So application date, priority category, they'll come off first in those 2 orders, and we'll be able to explore what's best for them. So I think that's why we wanted to add that to this slide to make sure that no matter, what their goals are that that's something that we're pointing out in this call today. Um, Felix, that's a complicated question, and it depends on if they're planning to stay in Colorado and work, or if their ticket to work is assigned, and Mike may be able to speak more, but like if their ticket to work and their plan is already signed in California, they would have to transfer it to Colorado. So there are a lot of nuances in that, but if they're in California and they want to apply and see what California has to offer, part of that assessment is going to be, can we send you to school, things like that. So I think that that really fits the picture of what DBR can do and kind of help with that expert assessment of what's best for you. So yeah, that got long-winded, but there's a few pieces of the puzzle, but we also can partner together. So it depends is kind of like VR's catchphrase in life. So yes.
Thank you, Rachel. And I know there can be lots of questions surrounding that, but really for our purposes, we just want to encourage you to connect with DVR as you're looking at inclusive higher education. I like Rachel's language of DVR can be a piece of the puzzle. CMAs can be a piece of the puzzle. And so we want to encourage you, even though there's that waitlist language out there, still pursue that because the partnership as we're helping students determine their future goals is really important and critical to get all those pieces together. Okay, and then this is just maybe common knowledge, but I think it's important for us to toss it out there of it's very normative for students and families to have their own forms of contributions. And so like I mentioned earlier, those work study funds, if students are paid via work study, that's a check given to them that then they can give right back to their tuition. Um, any on-campus or off-campus internships or employments, we've seen our students be eager to invest in their own education, when they're receiving those funds to say, I want to give this back to the cost of my education because it's been so worthwhile. You can also utilize your SSI or SSDI from either students or the families. That's income to the family that you get to determine how it's appropriately used. And so that can be applied to tuition and costs. There are also private student loans that you might be able to find that are not federal financial loans, but you can locate your own private loans if that's something that you're interested in. We would encourage you to connect with a benefits counselor just to determine how that might impact things. And so you can access that through DVR, Colorado Office of Employment First, things like that. We can connect you with a benefits counselor. I'm sure you guys know this, but we encourage families to do the research of each of these options. I can't tell you a blanket statement that all of these things will be feasible or appropriate for you. I hope that they would be able to. I do want to encourage you to look into each one because even families that have felt like, maybe they wouldn't receive any federal financial aid because their income is so high have been surprised by the grants that they've been able to receive. And that helps because the cost can be really overwhelming. So we encourage you to dig in and again, reach out if there's ways for us to help give a little bit more resources or support. We have a financial resource webpage on our inclusive higher education page. There's also a Think College webpage that has a wealth of information, some pun intended. And then all of these are links directly to our program so that you can see how they break down their cost. We also have one of the resources that we'll send you in a follow-up email is a breakdown. It's kind of like a grid of here are all of our programs in the state of Colorado. Here are some of their components, how long they last, and if it's residential or not. And also here's what's anticipated. Here's the average cost for that institution, just so you can see what's feasible for your family to maybe hone in on. These are the two that we can really look at, or we can really look at this one with residential living. And so that kind of gives you a good comparison of cost in the state of Colorado, knowing that all of these pieces and resources might be able to help you chip away at that. Okay. Any questions for the common good? And if not, we'll be able to kick it over to Mike, but I do want to just make sure I pause before we get into Colorado Able accounts and see what questions have come up. Okay. Alrighty, well, I will keep my eye on the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop that in there. I'll be happy to message you back as Mike shares. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share, Mike, and give you all the freedom to share with us about Colorado Able accounts.
Perfect. Just give me a moment. Let me share my screen. Oops. Okay. So yeah, again, my name is Mike Keglovitz, and I manage ABLE accounts for the state of Colorado. And basically, Colorado ABLE is part of the Department of Higher Ed for the state. And then below that is College Invest. And College Invest is a self-funded independent nonprofit within the Department of Higher Ed. And then below that is Colorado ABLE. So basically, when we launched about 9 years ago, when federal legislation was passed, they said who's ever managing the college savings program for the state is also going to be managing the ABLE accounts, because the tax code for 529s is a 529, and then ABLE is a 529A. So it's similar to a college savings account, but there are differences. And so, one of the big differences is in the college savings world, you can have multiple accounts per person. You can have a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a parent all have accounts on behalf of their grandchild or niece or nephew. In the ABLE world, it's just one account per person. So that's one of the big differences that between those two accounts. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other differences that why an ABLE account is a little more beneficial. But first, the real significant aspect to an ABLE account is that the asset cap that Medicaid and Social Security have is a $2,000 asset cap. So if you have more than $2,000 in total assets, that could be a retirement account, that could be a checking account. If it's higher than $2,000, you can lose your federal benefits. Other benefits also include Section 8 housing, food stamps, any federal benefits that have income requirements or asset requirements rather. ABLE accounts helps. So a lot of times for SSI and for Medicaid, they have the asset side of things. So you have to meet that. ABLE's really helpful for assets. It's not so helpful for the income side. So it doesn't mean that if you're putting money into the ABLE account that individual can work and make more money. They're still limited by how much income they can have on a monthly basis. But it does help on the asset side. So it's an exempt resource when it comes to assets, especially when it comes to SSI and for Medicaid. Once money's in an ABLE account, it grows tax deferred. And then when they go to get it and use it, it's also not taxed. So it does have a lot of tax benefits being in the ABLE account. This might not be pertinent, but this just changed in January. The onset of disability occurs before age 46 now. Before, historically, for this program, it was age 26 or before age 26. Now it's moved up to age 46. So there's a lot more people, traumatic brain injuries, degenerative diseases that can qualify for ABLE accounts that didn't qualify in the past. So if the disability happened before age 46, if they're on SSI or SSDI as a result of a disability, they can open up an ABLE account. If they're not on SSI or SSDI, they can still qualify for an ABLE account. They just need to get a doctor's note or a doctor's letter, and they're supposed to do that annually if they're not on SSI or SSDI. So they would just get a doctor's letter. You do not need to submit that doctor's letter here into ABLE. They would just keep that on file and annually get that updated. So something that's changed, this changed almost 4 years ago. Before this, Medicaid could recover from the account. So a lot of people were really nervous about putting money into an ABLE account, because if something happened to that person that was eligible for ABLE, Medicaid could come back and take some or take all of the money that was in there. About 4 years ago, we eliminated that. Medicaid can no longer seek reimbursement. So if something happened to that individual, that money would go to whoever was handling the estate, the executor, and that money would be dispersed, to who that money should be dispersed to. So that's a big change that a lot of people, there's a lot of misconception about that. So I still have kept a slide in there just so that people understand kind of how it works. The other thing in January last year, you could put 19,000 into an ABLE account. and now you can put 20,000 into an Able account. When we launched 9 years ago, it was 14,000. So every couple of years, it keeps climbing and going up, and it can come from a variety of places. It can come from the individual, it can come from parents or family or trust. Lots of different places that money can come from. The other thing is, if the individual is working, they can do more than the 20,000. They can do 100% of the federal poverty limit of the prior year, which is it's over 15,500. It's just over that, uh, but they have to make that amount. So if they made $5,000 for the year, they can do 5,000 on top of the 20,000. They wouldn't be able to do 10,000 because they only had earned income for five. So that's a change that is very helpful for people that have additional income.
Mike, can I pause you real quick and go back to
Yeah.
the clawback, where you talked about, it's no longer those additional funds are no longer going back to Medicaid. We have a question. Is the clawback state by state, or is that the same across the country? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's state by state. So if you are planning on moving to a different state, even if you had a Colorado Able account and you went to a different state that had clawback, uh, they would be able to claw back from the Colorado account, even though we don't have it here. It's where you would be receiving those services that determines that. So yeah, if you go to the Able National Resource Center, if you have questions around that, you can look up a state and see if they have Medicaid recovery or not. So that is a state by state basis.
Can I ask alternatively, if you were coming from a state that had clawback and you're moving to Colorado, they wouldn't be able, they would be able to transfer that all over to Colorado Able, correct?
That's a good question. I would suspect it depends on when the account was established, Able account technically. So if they had an account and they were in a state that did have clawback, and then they moved to a state that didn't, I would guess that they would try to recapture whenever that Able account was established because they paid out for it, at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, but if they came to Colorado and opened up the account, then they wouldn't have. I don't think they would have clawback at that point. Yeah, they wouldn't because it's from when the Able account was established.
Okay.
So yeah, those are good questions. Um, so the other thing is, Able accounts really it's for qualified disability expenses, and this is a big difference compared to like a 529 plan. 529 is very specific. It has to be for tuition, room, board, computer, books, those types of things. And for some of the programs with inclusive higher education, you might not be able to use the 529 account. Uh, Depending on the certificate program that's there. But in an Able account, you can use it for an inclusive program. That wouldn't be a problem at all. And you can roll money from an Able or from a 529 account into an Able account. It does count for that year's contributions, so it would count towards that $20,000. So you couldn't roll money 20,000 and then put an additional funds in there. So that's something to keep in mind, but you can use it for anything around education. So you see that these are all very general categories, which is great because a lot of things can fit into those categories. So housing, it could be rent, it could be paying a mortgage, transportation, it could be taking the bus, it could be taking Lyft or Uber, it could be buying a car, maintaining a car, it could be air travel. If you look at prevention and wellness, if the individual wanted to go on vacation, they could do that. If they needed somebody to go with them to help and support them, they could pay for that. They're just not paying for the whole family to go on vacation. Or if they go out to eat and they go to Chili's, they could pay for their meal. They're just not paying for everybody's meal that's with them. So the qualified disability expense, if the individual is benefiting that owns the Able account, it's probably going to count as a qualified disability expense. If somebody else is benefiting, it's probably not. So a lot of times people still keep and maybe have a regular checking account, just depending on what their goals are. If they like buying presents for other people for the holidays or for birthdays or things like that, or they want to go out on a date, they could pay for the meal uh, out of a regular account. If they're going by themselves or they want to pay just for their portion, they could use the Able account for that. So almost anything is going to qualify as long as they're benefiting. So anything to keep a household up and running is also a qualified disability expense. Oftentimes, if somebody's living at home and they're paying rent, it might be a percentage of the rent. You can set that up and you can pay out of an Able account. Likewise, if they have other expenses like heating or garbage or things like that, they can use an Able account to pay for those things. So the other thing is, if the Able account exceeds $100,000, SSI would be suspended, but Medicaid would not go away. Even if the account grew to $300,000, they could still continue to have their Medicaid benefits. And if the individual has SSDI, SSDI is not impacted by that $100,000 mark. So somebody could be collecting or receiving SSDI if they accumulated enough quarters of meaningful income, so equivalent to 10 years, or if their parents retired, they could be eligible for SSDI based on their parents' work history, or if the parents are deceased, they could also be eligible for SSDI. So a lot of times people might be on SSI for a while, and then they could transfer over to SSDI, and SSDI is not impacted by the $100,000 mark, and neither is Medicaid. So the other thing is the Able account, if you think of a big umbrella, on the yellow side, these are different investment options, and you get the individual gets to decide, okay, I want to put 10% in the aggressive option. I'm going to put 40% in the growth option, and the rest of the 50% I'm going to put into the checking/debit option, which is the banking option. You can do whatever you want. You could do 10% in each and the rest of it into the checking option. The checking does come with a debit card. You can order checks. It's FDIC insured. Um, uh, and then you can have on the investment side, when it gets to the point where you want to use it, maybe you're saving for an iPad, 4 or 5 years down the line. When you get there, you can transfer the money from the investment side and put it into the checking side so that you can use your debit and you can go buy that iPad. Or you could put it all in investments. It just depends on how you're planning on using this account. To have access to Able, there's a quarterly fee if you sign up for electronic delivery of statements. It's $8.25 per quarter. And then there's a checking fee, but you can eliminate that with electronic statements as well. That would be $2 a month if you have an average monthly balance of $250, or if you sign up for electronic delivery, it's discounted. So we are trying to bring the cost down. When we first launched, it was $15 a quarter, and now we've gotten it down to $8.25. As more people are opening up accounts and there's more assets, we're able to renegotiate and bring that cost down for the individuals. The investment options does have a fee. It's 0.37 to point or 0.33 to 0.37, depending on which investment option. These are through Vanguard, so they're very low cost index funds. So that's pretty cheap in comparison to like a managed fund. It's a lot cheaper than those products. Oops. We talked about that, so I'm kind of skipping that. So at this point, if you're like, hey, this really sounds like a good program, like my son or daughter is getting close to $2,000 mark each month, we kind of have to spend down. Uh, what you can do is to open it, it is going to be a virtual banking experience. You're not going to have a brick and mortar place where you can go to get help. You're going to be calling customer service, or you're going to be logging in online, and you would go to coloradoable.org. You would read the 130 pages of the plan disclosure documents that everybody reads. And then after that, this is the information that you'd want: social, birth date, permanent street address, and as well, if there's a checking or savings account that you want to connect, that you can log in and transfer money over, or you can say, hey, I want to each month on this date, I want to transfer money from this account over into Able account so that it's exempt. So this is the process that you would want to do to enroll in the account.
Mike, would you say that most people prefer to enroll over the phone, or is it like a form on that website that they can complete?
I kind of encourage people to do it through the website, just because then you create a username and password, and you can then log in and kind of do regular banking. The other thing to keep in mind, if you're opening up the account, the if the individual is 18 or over, and they're opening an account, if they're capable of managing the account, they can open it up. If they want somebody to help, if they're capable and they want somebody to help them, they do need to have power of attorney. We do have a blank form on our website that can be filled out, and they can give access. They can give access to the statements to that individual, or they can give access to statements and to be able to transact on that. If somebody is not capable of managing a financial account, then the individual that's opening it up on behalf of them, they would put the owner, which would be the individual that's disabled, that qualifies for the account. And then they would be the authorized individual or the agent acting on behalf of that person. It could be a parent, it could be a guardian, it could be a sibling or an aunt, uncle, it could be a rep payee. It just kind of depends on what that situation is and who should be managing the ABLE on behalf of that person. So we kind of talked about some of this. There's no Medicaid recovery that was eliminated. The other thing that has just been pushed out to 2030 is that the Colorado State deduction. If you put money into the ABLE account, you can deduct that on your Colorado State taxes. So that's a nice little benefit. And then we also adopted the hierarchy of people being able to open up an account on behalf of someone. So typically, sometimes people call and say, hey, I want my wife to be able to open it or transact on the account with me. I want our son or daughter to be able to be the third. If you put a lot of people on there, it's sometimes really hard to get decisions made because everybody has to sign off on things. So typically, because it's so easy to be able to transfer to another person, I typically encourage people to just have one person. If something happens to them where they can't manage it anymore, it's very easy to transfer that to the next person to be able to help. It just makes it easier to kind of transact on the ABLE account.
And then there's a question about how do you track expenses in an ABLE account? Is it similar to any online banking where you can like see
Yeah,
what
I mean,
expenses were done, and how do you verify if it's approved? If you could just give some insight on that.
yeah, so you should keep track of the receipts. That being said, I meet with managers from all over the country. I literally haven't heard of, we talked about it at our last call. I haven't heard of any account being audited by the Social Security or by the IRS. Um, but it is best practice to keep the receipts. If you have the banking option, you're using the debit card, you will get a monthly statement, but it's not itemized. So, at the end of the day, it is important to keep those receipts. Here at Colorado Able, we do not ask for those. Those would be for you to maintain and have, if the account was ever audited or challenged, that you'd be able to produce that and show, hey, this is, we went to Chili's and we had a burger and fries and X, Y, and Z. But you do not need to submit that in to us. So the other thing is, if you open up an ABLE account, we'll put in $25 to help get you started, to help defer some of those quarterly fees. That you can have the account for 6 or 9 months before you'd be paying it on your own. So, that's something that a lot of times it's nice to just have a little extra time. After 60 days, if the account isn't funded, they close the account. So this just gives people a little more time to be able to get it up and establish the account.
Mike, I'm going to toss out a couple questions as you kind of wrap up, if that's okay.
Sure.
One, can you just confirm, is the maximum amount or maximum deposit into Able per year, is it 20,000 or is that not the right number to think in our head?
So it's 20,000 unless they have earned income. If they have earned income, we have on our forms section on our website, the coloradoable.org website, there's a form section and there's a certificate for earned income. You fill that out and it's 100% of the federal poverty limit of the prior year. Last year it was 15,560. It's more because it's February. I don't have it memorized at the moment, but it's going to be right around 16,000. So if they have earned income, up to 16,000, then they can do 16,000 on top of the 20,000. So around 36,000 total. But if they only made 5,000 for the year, then they could do 5,000 on top of the 20,000. So they could do 25,000. So it just kind of depends on how much earned income they have. It's always up to 20,000 no matter what. And then if they have earned income, it's more.
Thank you for restating that. I appreciate it. And then, real quick follow-up from the receipt conversation. Do you recommend how long students or individuals should keep receipts?
I have heard 2 years is kind of what people want to keep it on file. Yeah, but yeah, that's just what I heard
Okay,
on that.
thank you.
Cool. Does anybody have any other questions at all? If something comes up, feel free. This is my email and my phone number, and I can also send this as a PDF to folks. Feel free to reach out. I get calls every day of specific circumstances. Hey, can I use it for this? Like, is this going to work? Or I'm happy to have conversations with people because everybody's situation is usually a little unique. And Especially with Able, it is a double-edged sword. There's a lot of freedom. There's also responsibility. And with that freedom, there can be people can be taken advantage of sometimes, depending on the situation or the circumstances. I think a lot of people use these accounts in different ways. But it's exciting that people are no longer in mandatory poverty, that they can save for things that are meaningful, whether it's for higher education or for housing down the road. It is a vehicle that's just a lot more broad compared to a 529 account where that was very specific and very limiting. Able account, if you don't use it all for education, you can use it for to live or help supplement a lifestyle.
I was wondering, the Able account, you can use it in the Global Inclusive Cafeteria, right?
Yes, you would use it like any other
Okay.
debit or credit card. You can use it at the point of sale. That would not be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Good question. Wonderful. Well, that puts us right at 6 o'clock. I am happy to hang tight if anybody has any follow-up questions. But just as a reminder, we're going to go ahead and send you my slides and Mike's slides and a couple of those handouts that we mentioned, just so that you have kind of a pocket of resources to dig back into this content. And then feel free to reach out to either of us if you have specific questions in either direction. But thank you all for coming on a Wednesday evening. I know that this is an important conversation and hopefully one that now you have some resources and some things in your hands that you can kind of bring in your support system to really make inclusive higher education or other future focused plans possible for your student.